Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Digital Power Peer Assessment Program Project Showcase for our cohort number 2 in our second training phase. Thanks so much for joining us today. I'm Stacy Erdman, and I'm serving as the project director for this project. Our peer assessment program is generously funded by an IMLS Laura Bush 21st Century Librarian Grant. We're currently wrapping up phase 2 of the grant with our second 3 cohorts nearing the end of their work on the project. These cohorts have spent a year getting to know one another and supporting each other as they learned about and completed different digital preservation assessments. They're going to share some of the highlights of that work with you today. Tomorrow, we will hold the project showcase for Cohort 1, and Cohort 3 will present on Thursday. If you'd like to join us for those presentations, you can use the free registration links on our website, which I will post in the chat momentarily. Our grant in this project will be drawing to an end this summer with the publication of a white paper and a volume of case studies written by our project participants. So be on the lookout for that. But for now, I'd like to introduce our wonderful cohort facilitator for Cohort 2, Carol Kussmann. Take it away, Carol.
Hi, everybody, and welcome. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Carol Kussmann. I'm the Digital Preservation Analyst at the University of Minnesota Libraries. And like Stacy said, I was a facilitator for this group of participants. And this group kind of represented smaller colleges, universities, kind of that was the size of their organizations that they were working with. So they were kind of paired up, put into this group for, kind of being a good sounding board for each other. So it was nice that everybody kind of seemed to work very well together. There were a lot of conversations that we had about, I was so glad I was paired up with this group or these people. So hopefully you will see some of that, and it was useful to them. So we started with 6 participants in this group, and we're going to be hearing from 4 of them today. So first up, we're going to hear from Jaycie, and we have a video to play for that one. Jaycie, I know you do a little bit of introduction in your video. Is that good enough, or do you want to say anything else?
I think what I have in the video is just fine.
Okay. All right. And I will work on getting your video. And what we will do is we will all give presentations and then take question and answers at the end.
Hello, I'm Jaycie Voss. Until very recently, I was the Special Collections Coordinator and University Archivist at Rod Library at the University of Northern Iowa. I have since taken a different position, but for the duration of the Digital Power Peer Assessment Program in 2024, I was at UNI, so I will focus my presentation today on that. So just a little background about Special Collections and University Archives at UNI. UNI is a public school. It's a sort of mid-sized school, and the archives are situated within the academic library. There are 3 full-time staff who do lots of different things, including a little bit of digitization and digital preservation and collecting work. We have a really key partner in the library in the Digital Scholarship Unit who manages the digital repository. UNI as a whole, as a public university, receives funding through the state, and so the library gets most of its budget through public funds. And Special Collections and University Archives has had some really solid starts to digitization of materials in-house and some sort of initial born digital collecting practices. So there are currently about 30 terabytes between the archives and the digital scholarship unit at the library. And this includes a range of materials like photos, campus publications. Some of it's digitized in-house, but some things have been digitized by outside vendors. Things are primarily stored on local networks, but we also utilized Google Share Drives quite a bit. And some things that we're doing really, really well right now are providing access to a global audience through UNI ScholarWorks, which is the repository. And that has really robust metadata. So there's really good description and technical metadata for all these different things. So access and being able to share materials are definitely 2 major strengths. Some issues and challenges that we face that really made me want to participate in the Digital POWRR program are sort of the storage and integrity verification side of things. It hasn't really been clear exactly who is responsible for that or where the resources will come to do those really critical parts of the digital preservation sort of life cycle. And as the campus itself is continuing to create lots of born digital materials, the need to kind of get a handle on born digital accessioning, processing, preservation, all of that is really, really important. So I wanted to be part of the peer assessment program to sort of better establish my knowledge, figure out what's going on in the field, what other people are doing that I could learn from. So through the peer assessment program, I completed a number of different assessments. So first was the NDSA Levels, which you can see on the screen here. I found this really helpful because it sort of breaks down the specific tasks or steps on a really like technical and practical standpoint. So it helps me understand not only what should I be doing, but how are we doing in these different areas. And then the DPC RAM was another one that we did, and it was really helpful because it gives a more holistic view. So the NDSA Levels focused more on, you know, like really concrete things like where are you storing this information and are you using write blockers, things like that. But the DPC RAM helped me really think about the organizational capabilities that are important for digital preservation. So it brought in things like advocacy, policy and strategy, IT capabilities. So doing those two together really helped me see a much broader picture of what we were doing well and what we needed to improve upon. It really emphasized to me how important communication is with IT, making sure we're on the same page about goals and concerns. It also really illuminated some potential areas of improvement in understanding roles and responsibilities with the archives and with the digital scholarship unit and others in the library and with IT. So understanding who's responsible, for example, for digitizing the archives material, who's responsible for collecting born digital material, what capabilities do all these different people have? Are we doing things that there's a lot of overlap that maybe we don't need to be replicating each other's work, things like that. They also kind of overall pointed out to me just my general lack of access and knowledge to some different tools. Part of that stemmed from some security concerns that IT had, and being part of the peer assessment program really helped me understand that that wasn't unusual, and it gave me some ideas to kind of work around that. And then we also did the peer assessment with our partners in Digital POWRR. So that was really helpful because I kind of worked through with one other person in a really, really detailed way, what our practices are, what could we be doing, what should we be doing, what are some different goals. And it was really helpful just to have one other person to focus on all these different things with and really learn just what's working well at other institutions, what challenges are they facing that I should maybe be expecting, or could we give each other advice, things like that. So taken all together, all three were really, really helpful in painting a much broader picture. So as part of the program, this is kind of an overview of the different goals that I set for the archives at 3, 6, 12, and longer term month increments. So really focusing on sort of establishing just basic practices, gaining access to tools, better having a better relationship with campus IT in terms of making sure we're understanding where each other's coming from and what our capabilities and limitations are. It also helped me really focus on some very specific goals, like working on an audio and moving image identification and inventory project. Also establishing a digital accessioning workflow, trying out really specific tools like Preservica, and having better documentation for decisions and practices up to the current date. With the Digital POWRR technology startup funds, I was able to make multiple purchases of software that IT could approve. So this sort of helped me get around some issues I had been facing where there were security concerns around open source tools that I wanted. So IT wasn't very, and they weren't really able to proceed with those. So being able to actually purchase some different tools made a huge difference because I could actually gain access to them and start trying them out. And we also were able to buy a write blocker, which was important because after having more communication with IT and sort of understanding what they had readily available, this was still something that their current products weren't going to meet our needs. So I was able to actually buy something, and we're eagerly awaiting IT's help in setting it up for us. So we made a lot of really good progress on a lot of the different goals in the program. We were able to set up a dedicated workstation and try out a lot of these different tools and really start building some workflows around digital accessioning and processing with these different tools like TreeSize Pro and TerraCopy. I was able to start trying out some ways to improve our storage. We had been relying really heavily on Google Share Drive, which had become very, very expensive in recent years because of some changes with Google's products. And so I had a goal of kind of figuring out what some alternative options were and starting to document ways to move forward outside of Google. I had goals of having more meetings to just communicate better with IT and sort of make sure we were on the same page and we were in regular communication. And then there are some longer term goals about fine tuning different responsibilities and roles, not only within the library, but across the university. So it's really clear who is responsible for setting the strategy for digital preservation and collecting. What is IT's responsibility versus the repository versus the archives, things like that. So doing the assessments really kind of clarified some areas that we could grow in, and it helped me set these different goals that we were able to really make some progress on in the last 3 to 6 months. The assessment program overall really gave me a supportive community of practice to be part of. I learned about a lot of digital preservation things in grad school, but not having practiced them for a while, and with the evolving field, it was really helpful to have these sort of curated monthly topics with different readings and resources and people to really think through these things with. So just having it set up in a really structured way was helpful for me, and it was really beneficial to have my cohort to bounce ideas around with, to learn from them what was working, what wasn't working. If they had strategies for making progress in an area, I could learn from them, and we were all really benefiting from each other. It gave me a really solid safety net to just try things out, especially with the help of our mentor in the cohort. I could pick her brain and get a lot of ideas about maybe this strategy didn't work, so what was a way that I could get around it, or was there another option that I hadn't considered? The program also just helped kind of illuminate a lot of existing resources that are out there in a much more curated way. So just knowing which trusted places I can go to, like Copter, like the Digital Preservation Coalition, that was really, really helpful in just making my resources much more obvious and trusted. Having deadlines and having real accountability was important. Digital preservation is something that was one of my big responsibilities at UNI, but was one of many responsibilities, so it didn't always take priority. So being part of the program really helped me be a lot more accountable. I had solid goals that I was working towards, and it just helped kind of keep this a focus of the past year. And I think one of the biggest benefits of being part of the program is that now that I am no longer at the University of Northern Iowa, I was able to create a really solid kind of package of documentation to hand off to my colleagues and to my predecessors. So really solid documentation of the current state of practice with all these different assessments, and really concrete recommendations in both the short, medium, and long term that my colleagues can hopefully use to their benefit in the future. Just being able to hand off something with a really clear roadmap was really, really helpful. So it has been a really positive experience, and I am grateful to have been part of the 2024 cohort.
Thank you, Jaycie. All right. Next, we're going to hear from Alexis.
Hi, everyone. I'm Alexis Heywood, and as with Jaycie, I have changed jobs since the time I was in the program. But over that course, I was the archives and reference librarian at Hagerstown Community College, located in Hagerstown, Maryland. The college was established in 1946 and is very proud that it can call itself the first community, or at the time, junior college in the state of Maryland. So the college is very proud of its history. But surprisingly, there was no archive set up. It likes to tout like it served its veterans when they were coming back from World War II. Various items that documented this were collected haphazardly over the years by various librarians or staff, the PR department, but it was not until 2018 that the college finally hired an archivist to officially take the stuff, and at that point it was just stuff that was pushed into a back closet, and create an official archives to preserve the history of the college. So the first person that was hired, they did a considerable amount of work in the 2.5 years that they were there, taking a mold-filled closet full of documents and doing extensive mold remediation and having the construction of a humidity and temperature controlled room to house the collection, as well as setting up archive space and beginning the documentation process and the organization of all of these documents. So when I came in 2022, a lot of the physical work had been set up in place. And as I was reading the documentation on where the archives was, I noticed that the digital side of it was more or less just, we acquired some things and they're on a hard drive, they're in some files. We're kind of digitizing the newspapers so that the acid from them doesn't eat them away. I was like, okay, this is a place I know I can make an impact. And at the time, I'm looking for grants. How can I do this? I have no budget. The archives was part of a budget line of $1,000 total for physical, anything involving it. So how can I do this? And how can I learn about digital preservation? Because unfortunately, I didn't have an extensive background in grad school using processing digital records and how to manage it. So I happened to get a listserv email that was advertising the Digital POWRR program, and I'm like, this is what the college needs, because we have this stuff and it's on a hard drive. I've had experience, those go bad. So I applied and I got it, and I'm very fortunate that I was able to get in, because I will say the information that I gained through the program was absolutely invaluable. Just the extensive amount of just resources and education via articles and the websites that were provided. I went from knowing almost nothing to having a pretty good manager. I can pass along a lot of information to the person that is taking over the position. So the way that the program was set up, the initial part was doing an initial just evaluation and an inventory of what we had of our digital records. So I think that was important, because where I was in coming into the college, we didn't have so much. Like we only had about 394 gigabytes at the time. but spread out over almost 500 folders on a shared drive. But then numerous legacy media, floppy disk, CDs, reel-to-reel. Not even sure how I was going to deal with these, how I was going to try to digitize them, because I knew we didn't have access to what was on them. So just taking that initial step in the program, I think, was really important to understand, okay, well, I have all this stuff. Now, what's the next step in having to deal with it? That's where the readings and learning about the tools that were available. I will say, I don't know if everybody probably deals with digital registration. Some of the, I think, my challenges were trying to decipher what tools would be useful to my organization, because at times it was overwhelming. And not working with IT, who has to control everything that you download. You can't just try things out. So I think that for me was probably partially the hardest part of the program, was just trying to figure out what would be useful, to have to wait 2 weeks before I could get it downloaded and that kind of thing. But going on that, we now have an inventory of the collection, then going into the self-assessments. That, I think, is kind of where a light bulb moment hit of, okay, this isn't as bad as I thought it was, because we were able to break it down, and both of them in different ways, kind of going off of how Jaycie explained it, with the understanding the people aspect, and then looking at the technology aspect. And it's like, yes, my college archives was only 6 years old. We were in the ones, we were in the zeros as far as ratings, but at a point I could understand, how can we get to a 1, a 2 in the next year or two? It seemed achievable. There wasn't of like, oh, there's no way. But at the same point, I'm looking at the top level, so level 4, and I'm like, I don't know that we would have the resources at the level that our archives is. And just the staffing, which is 1 person, for physical, digital, everything involving in archives. There's only 1 person dealing it at the college at the moment. So it's understanding that, what's feasible at our level, and that's okay. I think I struggled with that. Like, I want to have it the best, but I don't think I'm gonna be able to do 2 different geographical locations for my files. And just understanding that sometimes things are a reality, and we're trying to get the best that we can, with what we have. So that was really useful. I also greatly appreciated the peer assessment. I got to work with Sarah, who is also from a community college. So we have a very equal understanding of just how organizations work at that level, and just where our limitations are within our positions, and within how the archives are working, and the challenges that we're both dealing with. It's that sense of community. And we had it even in the larger group, not just the community college, but the universities. We all have these struggles, and that's okay. But we had somebody to sometimes commiserate with, when you're just like, I really want to do this, but I can't figure it out, or I don't know how to do it. And just that back and forth was really helpful, as part of doing that. I think, looking at one of the questions asked preparing for this presentation, was something that wasn't necessarily applicable to it. And I think that's part of the where's our good enough. I don't know that we'll ever hit level 4s on anything. And also just partial, like we have the I was very appreciative of the offer of the digitization that was offered to us, but unfortunately at our school level, it was still unachievable. So that was unfortunate as far as that goes. But having the tools of the DPC, those I continually go back, and those are a large bookmark that I made sure that I left for the next person coming in. During this, I was able to come up with a rudimentary digital preservation plan. And I think hopefully with the amount of information I was able to compile to pass along, that the work will be continued. We were able to, I was able to set up a designated workstation, and as well as getting just even just the knowledge from IT that we're attempting this was something that I was able to gain mid-level acceptance from the IT as people who were just like, who know me, and they're like, okay, let's work on this. Like, oh, we found an old computer, like you can use this. Sometimes just fostering those relationships within the college are important, even if it's just the small things of like, oh, we're thinking about it. It means it's on people's minds. We were also, through the work and having the assessments, I was able to convince the school that the college should, and the archive should start storing the committee and the board of trustees records and minutes from their meetings, which before them were not stored in any sort of digital preservation management system. So that was, I think, my biggest achievement as far as institutional collecting would be those records, because now there was a trust built over the work that they saw that I was doing, that they're like, okay, yes, it makes sense that you're keeping these. I was able to address access with them, why I should have it versus the just the committee chairs having it, and why for the long run it would work better for the college as a whole. Overall, I very much enjoyed the experience that I had. I think it did definitely benefit the college and myself personally on an education level. And I'm hoping that with the materials that I did, they will continue to go forward and expand the program and be able to solidify the policies that I started drafting. And then I think it just, part of the program was just learning how to find that sweet spot of being sustainable as a lone archivist in our community, and then just hoping that it goes through. And I'm forwarding through now. I deal with strictly digital records, so I have brought in that knowledge that I gained over the past year into my current position, and I'm just very grateful for everything I learned and the work that I did with the people in the group. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Alexis. That was great. All right, Doreen.
I'd like to share my screen. Can you all see?
Yep,
Yes.
we can. Yep, now we just see your slides.
Okay, good. I'm sorry, I'm just trying to get things out of the way. Okay. Hi, everyone. I am Doreen Dixon. I'm the Electronic Records Archivist at Drake University's Archives and Special Collections Department, located in Cole's Library. So a quick overview about the university itself, and then I'll go a little bit into the department. So Drake University is a mid-size institution in Des Moines, Iowa, and it was established in 1881. It serves undergraduate students across more than 100 minors, majors, and concentrations, and it also also offers graduate students with over 35 degree programs and online programs. The University Archives and Special Collections, despite the fact that the institution was established in 1881, was established just in 2013. It consists of 4 full-time employees, including the archives director, myself, the electronic records archivist, the digital projects librarian, and the university archives associate. The small group relies heavily on student workers because of the size. The The archives provides access, preserves and provides access to the university's records, along with its rare and unique collections to support its institutional administrative, teaching, research, and services. The archives also conducts various outreach programs, and we do so through one-shot classes where we visit classes and we basically talk about incorporating primary archival resources into research. And on top of those, we do presentations in collaboration with our HR department that offers the campus faculty and staff professional development. And through that program, we offer classes that talk about the importance of archives and how it connects with their roles. Because I feel like a lot of people that employees at the university don't really see how the archives ties in. So we provide that course as an avenue to connect with our university community. On top of that, we also provide workshops that talk about records management and the importance of conducting good record keeping practices. In the digital preservation program, myself, along with the digital projects librarian and the archives associate, are responsible for digital content. The digital preservation skill level within the archives group itself ranges from low to high. Right now, I'm the only one that does like continuous digital preservation training, and I'm hoping to get that to improve that because of benefits that I will talk about later in my presentation. The program is supported partially by the University-wide Information and Technology Services, otherwise known as ITS. So far, they have helped me establish a digital curation workstation, which I'm very grateful for. The technician that I'm currently paired up with, fortunately, is very involved and has so far gone beyond what I expected. Right now there's no designated funds for a digital preservation program, although the archives director, through the endowment funds that the archives has purchased hardware and software for the initial startup of the program. Something that I forgot to mention was that the archives also has, it was established using a special endowment fund. And so that's where most of our operating purchases are made from. However, there are a few things that are archives related that are purchased through the general library budget. But in order to get those, if there are purchases that have to be made out of the general library funds, the library dean has to approve those. This is just a quick snapshot of the hard work that my ITS technician did, which I appreciated because more than half of the things that was done here, I couldn't have done it on my own. And that collaborative effort is something that I also want to talk about later in my presentation. A little bit about the collection. So the collections in the archives and special collections has, so we have about 282 collections currently in our holdings, and that includes physical, born digital, and digitized materials. And between the born digital and digitized materials, there are various formats from PDFs, video files, audio files, the list goes on. In terms of storage, they're approximately 13.82 terabytes of born digital materials, and 5.7 terabytes are currently on obsolete storage media. So that is something that I'm looking to handle further on. And through the program, through the digital preservation program, I was able to come up with a timeline to address those issues. In terms of digitized materials, 617 gigabytes are stored, and both, I must say, both the digitized and the born digital are stored in SharePoint, similar to Jaycie's situation. And but while in storage, there is no monitoring being done for these files. The access to these files is mainly given to ITS and to core archives team members, including myself, the archives director, the digital projects librarian, and the archives associate. So a lot of my colleagues spoke about the challenges faced and how the program helped to highlight, help them work through step by step, the program itself, their individual programs. For me, I specifically like the structure of Digital POWRR because as a new archivist, I feel like a lot of information was rolling around my head and it was not very organized. And through Digital POWRR, through the peer assessments, and through the DPC RAM and NDSA assessment documents, I was able now to take all that information and structure it and create a plan. And while doing that, several challenges stood out to me. And I broke it down into departmental, university, and library. So I'm just going to touch a bit. I'm not going to talk about all of them. I'm just going to talk about a few of them. So in terms of the departmental challenge, it was, I realized that digital preservation training was a key aspect. So even though I'm responsible for building the program, I believe in true collaborative efforts. Um, in previous, I've gone to previous workshops and I heard about the term talking about radical collaboration. And Digital POWRR really brought home that for me, that in order for an institution to really build its program, we have to work as a team. So I realized that as a team, the archives needed to, including students, it was important for even our students to have opportunities to learn a little bit about the fundamentals of digital preservation, because a lot of them are dealing with processing of collections, and a lot of those collections are hybrid. So once they come across a born digital material, what do they do? So it's important for them to also have the fundamentals of digital preservation. And also I spoke about collaboration, working across various departments. So currently within the archives, I realized because the basic training isn't there, there's a lot of siloed work. And my aim, given that I've realized the challenges now, my aim is to now break down some of those silos and create a more cohesive work among the team, because no matter what, a record is a record regardless of its format. And so for the team to come together and work together, find out the areas where there's overlap, where my work overlaps with digitization, where it overlaps with the processing of a physical collection, things like that, and creating like a standardized workflow for the entire department. In terms of library challenges, excuse me, I realized that there needed to be a organizational commitment for digital preservation in written form, because I feel like once something is written down, it's more there's more of a commitment more than if it is verbal. And so I realized that the library needed to incorporate within its strategic plans and its governing docs wording that includes digital preservation. And if that's done, then they'll be able to better now plan accordingly, creating annual goals for the department, and even going down further down into like individual annual goals and stuff like that. But I realized that embedding digital preservation into core documents, library documents, was essential. And then overall, on a university level, that it was important that the library had people on a university level that was a part of policymaking in terms of data. Currently there is a group that works on data policies, and there is currently no one from the library that's on that group. The archives being one of the groups that hold essential data for the university, I think it's important for at least one member to be on that group. Another issue was that the university does not have a records retention policy, and that makes it kind of hard to get a strategic plan into place to show institutional systematic support of having records transferred to the archives. And as a result, I've noticed that there are several gaps, especially in the areas of equity and inclusion, um, in terms of specifically with our student organizations, because I feel like they reflect the true diversity of the university. There are so many groups on campus, and students are very much involved in contemporary issues. And by getting those records, we would be able to capture that information. So lessons learned, as I said before, the DPC RAM and the NDSA assessments were amazing. For me personally, it brought to light a lot of things that I hadn't noticed before. It kind of a little bit gave me a pat on the back, because it helped me to realize that the track that I was on was actually the right track, even though I was just doing my thing, trying to make trying to do the best with the situation that I had. And so it highlighted some of the work that I did. And then it also highlighted the work that had to be done. That's just another snapshot. I realized that a lot of the work that was done, thankfully with the support of the archives director, was allowed me to hit a lot of areas, the level one, but it also allowed me to see that, yes, there's additional work that needs to be done. Through the POWRR program, I was able to create multiple goals, short term, midterm, long term, and I realized that they all targeted 6 main areas in terms of policy and development, technical infrastructure, staffing, training, and collaboration. The list goes on and on. But one of my short-term goals was to just start checking, searching the internet and trying to find training opportunities, given our current budget limitations, checking opportunities for my colleagues to at least receive basic digital preservation training. And so I was able to find a lot of things through the DPOEN site that offered both free and paid opportunities for digital preservation opportunities. Overall, excuse me, overall, I gained so much from this program. I feel like I have become a better practitioner. I'm more as I said before, the organization, the information that I have is a lot more structured. I know exactly how to approach things. It provided me with resources and tools and documents that I can now just do a walkthrough. I know if I come across anything, these are the questions I should ask. I truly understand now the three-legged stool model of how organization and organizational infrastructures combined with technological infrastructures and a resource framework really builds a sustainable digital preservation program. And I'm so appreciative of my colleagues, my fellow colleagues in the cohort, and my cohort leader for really walking me through any questions that I had. I could reach out to either one of them. And so I feel like it just really gave me that space to grow, not only as a new archivist, but just as a practitioner in general. And I'm so much more confident now in the work that I do. And I just want to say thank you.
Thanks, Doreen. That was great. All right, we have one more presentation from Sarah.
Hi, everyone. I decided to forego slides for this, so I'm just going to talk to you for a bit. I'm Sarah Young. I'm the Library Resources Specialist at Kirkwood Community College, and I've been at Kirkwood since 2016. I started, at our circulation desk and then moved into the role of the department assistant. And then in 2022, I took on my current position, and that position was created after our archivist and our library technical specialist both retired, and then their positions were combined and sort of reconfigured. So my current role, I'm responsible for cataloging, data analysis and reporting, and then archives management, which is what I'm going to talk about here. A little bit about Kirkwood. Kirkwood itself was established in 1966, and we serve a 7-county area in eastern Iowa. Our main campus is in Cedar Rapids. Our archives were established initially in 1973 as part of the library, and that's where they've stayed ever since. Currently, I'm the primary person responsible for the archives, but there are others here who assist with that. In particular, our circulation coordinator, and we do have a part-time library associate whose main focus is on archives projects. So our collection includes both physical and digital materials. Primarily, it's focused on the history of the college, though we do have some items in our collection related to the early development of the community college system in Iowa in the 1960s, since a lot of Kirkwood's current leaders. No, there's no slide, sorry. So we have some items in our collection related to the early development of the community college system in Iowa from the 1960s, since our early leaders were heavily involved in that. So our real issues related prior to beginning the program is that there is just a lack of knowledge about digital preservation. Our previous archivist, for the past 20-some years had been, primarily part-time, and she had done some work, trying to, with a couple initiatives to try and make some items of our collection more accessible digitally, but it was really related to the access side of things. There wasn't really any focus on the preservation side of digital items. And even like the born digital items that we had in our collection, they were primarily being like digital newsletters were getting like printed off and filed away. We had some video and some stuff like that saved on like, flash drives and such like that, but without really any plan in place to preserve them for long term, And I certainly didn't have enough knowledge when I took over this position to, institute that formal digital preservation plan. And then really the other main like struggle is time, and yeah, it was a limitation. It's always going to be a limitation. Archives is only one part of my responsibilities, so it's making the best use of what time I have to focus on the archives to make the biggest impact. So when I was hired into the role, I was kind of tasked with looking into improving our processes for managing our born digital items that we had been collecting. But, sort of really the first year, like the progress related to that was, slow or non-existent. I was still, working on my MLIS, but I had already completed a good portion of that and had not really been expecting to be in an archives focused role. So I didn't really take many classes that were focused on that. So really I spent the first year trying to catch up on the basics of archives management. And some of that was like joining professional organizations, reading webinars, all of that. And then towards the end of 2023, I saw through the Midwest Archives Conference email list an announcement about the POWRR peer assessment program. And it sounded like sort of the perfect fit for me to have opportunity to learn about digital preservation and to do it in a structured and supportive environment with other people who are having similar, issues in their collections. So like talked about by the others in my cohort, one of the main aspects of this program was going through a series of assessments, starting with the NDSA levels of digital preservation. And that was a really quick and straightforward assessment, but being the first assessment and being very much focused on the technology side of digital preservation, it felt both discouraging and overwhelming. Like I was still very much learning about, the basics of digital preservation. And since we had really done very little in our department, it just felt like I was starting at square one and I had like nothing to show at that point. But the next assessment was the DPC RAM, and like touched on by others already, that's a more holistic, complete assessment. So it does touch on the technical capabilities, but also sort of looks at the broader organization. And so I could see that we, on the organizational side, already had some solid, places we could build off of. Like, the library has, since I've been around, a pretty good relationship, with IT. So I knew people I could go to there for, when I would need to, and have since started implementing software and things. I know who I can reach out to in IT, with questions and to work with. So I also really thought that the DPC RAM assessment was a good tool for being able to communicate about all of the aspects of digital preservation. I initially did the assessment in March of 2024. And then a couple months later in June, I had a meeting with the dean of our department and was talking about the program and my progress through the program at that point. And we sort of went through the DPC RAM to sort of see, how Kirkwood was shaping up in all of those areas. And in that discussion had already noted that, you know, there were a couple areas where some progress had already been made in those few months. So that was, you know, really encouraging. I definitely see myself revisiting the DPC RAM assessment to be able to continue to benchmark, you know, our progress and where we want to continue to make progress. Similar to what Alexis was saying, you know, I don't think we necessarily have the capability or even the need to necessarily optimize and get to, you know, the top level on all of the areas, but it's a good tool to see like where we have made progress and where we might want to go next. And then the third assessment was the peer assessment. Alexis was my partner for that, and it was just really helpful to have someone in a very similar institution, in a very similar, you know, situation to work with. We would set aside time every like couple weeks to meet up. We had been using the NEDCC peer assessment document as a framework. So we would discuss like a section or two of that and go over it. But our conversations even went beyond digital preservation to other aspects of managing a community college archive. And that was really helpful to me. Like I was working on updating our main collections policy document, and Alexis was one of the first people I showed a draft of that to, and she shared her department's policies with me, and that gave me some ideas on how to improve mine. So, you know, it was just good to have someone to talk with, both, you know, about the digital preservation in our institutions, how it related to managing our archives as a whole and that whole sense. So that was like a really helpful part of the program, as well as just having, you know, not just that one-on-one, but our whole cohort meeting monthly to, you know, discuss different parts of digital preservation, what we were, what our successes were, what we were, you know, still having issues with, and hearing how others were sort of tackling those issues. So for this program, I've started to make some incremental progress, you know, on updating our practices. You know, it's sort of slow and steady work, but I've documented where we do have some existing digital workflows, especially for managing our board of trustees minutes. That's where we had the sort of most well-developed and well-documented workflows for managing digital items going into the program. So I've gone and made sure that our workflow documents related to that have been completely updated, noted where there's areas, you know, that need to be, where improvements need to be made, have sort of a draft of a new, just sort of general ingest and accessions process for any of our other born digital items that we're collecting, and have been working on right now implementing software to put that process into action. And then the next steps are really, you know, testing that on a small collection, and then, you know, building on that to move all of our born digital items into that process. And then also looking at how our items are stored digitally now. Currently, we have a mix of network, Kirkwood network storage, as well as some external hard drive storage, making sure that we have things stored in multiple places. I've started, you know, making sure things are checked for fixity, so we know if there's any changes in documents. So making sure that, you know, our storage situation is put in place for the long term. So that's, you know, another sort of part of the really next steps for our program. But I found this program to be like really valuable for me. Definitely like the first meeting I had with everyone, I had that sort of feeling of imposter syndrome, because, you know, even though we were all coming in with experiences of, you know, sort of struggling to put digital preservation in place, I felt intimidated being in, you know, a virtual Zoom room, but, you know, a room with other people who were practicing archivists. And I was just sort of really getting my feet wet in that area. But like now I feel, you know, much more comfortable being able to talk about digital preservation and what work we need to do there, but also just discussing the work I do in the archives in general and advocating for the importance of both my general archives work, our physical collections, our digital collections, and digital preservation at all levels of my organization. And I really do appreciate the connections I've made with Alexis, Carol, and all of the other members of the cohort too. So I really appreciate the chance to take part in this program and the chance to present a little bit about it today. So thank you.
Thanks, Sarah. Yeah, I just want to say too that I'm kind of going along with what you were saying about the imposter syndrome. I'm definitely proud of all of you. You all, you know, kind of came in and were like, we don't do anything. I can't get anything done. And I think you all became, you know, feeling much more confident in your abilities. And so kind of going through this process showed you the skills that you do have, and you learned some more. And I think that, you know, you definitely all created things that you can either use at your organizations or that you can pass off to the ones for those of you who have changed jobs already. So I think that's great. So Stacy, I don't know if you had anything else particular to say, but I think it's open for discussion.
No, I just want to say, you know, congratulations, and we're so glad you participated in the program, and I'm super proud of everything you're able to accomplish. Like this is why we created this program, so that, you know, you could have these kind of outcomes. So thank you again for being part of this experiment. But yeah, now I think we're happy to take questions. So if you want to ask the participants anything, you can put it in the chat or raise your hand and we'll call on you. And while we wait for people to ask questions, I have some questions. So I know some of you talked about some of the different assessment frameworks that you worked with and some of the limitations or frustrations there, but I'm curious if you have anything else to say on that. Like if you can identify any pain points with the specific tools that you worked with, things that were, I guess, harder, more frustrating.
While they're thinking, I'll say that one thing I kind of heard throughout was that at the beginning, they all kind of seemed really daunting. That it was kind of like, oh, there's this tool and I have to use it and it looks really hard. But then after kind of walking through it in general, you know, most of them were like, oh, I can do this. You know, I may need some input from other people, but at the same time, in general, you know, there may have been some other pain points, but in general, they were easy to do for this group. So.
I'll just add something. This is maybe a silly answer, but the actual peer assessment where we use the NEDCC framework, I think the hardest part about that was just how in depth it was. Like it just took a really long time to go through, but it ultimately paid off because when you're done with it, you have really, really detailed documentation. Doreen and I actually met in person to kind of kick off going through the document, and we were like, oh, we'll do this all in one day, and then we got into it and realized like, no, this is it ended up taking like a couple months really to do it completely, but you just kind of have to prepare to do a lot of work. It's not something that you can just that automatically happens, but again, it gave us really, really robust documentation that was really helpful in sharing with other people.
And I'll just jump in. I mean, for me personally, sometimes I need a kick in the butt. And I feel like that's what the document did. It's like, Doreen, you have to do this. And it's detailed, you know, so you have to go through it. And I couldn't put it off. It's something that I had to focus and I had to work on. And yeah, I appreciate it because it worked out in the end. I was like, oh, I have answers to this. Oh, I did speak to that person about this. So yes, it was a little bit of a pain point, but not really in the end. Yeah.
I think I can kind of add to that. It's when you first look at it, it's a little daunting because there's a lot of aspects to it, but then as you actually start to work through it, you're like, oh, I'm actually learning about my institution, like the goal of it, because we're finding out where we're sitting at and coming in at new to the organization in general, where I was like just learning about what are we like. That's I think any new person coming into an archive should probably do this, just so like even if they don't deal with it, they have an understanding. And it does break it down into plain language. I think that is key. That part of it did make that plain language, because sometimes, especially getting into digital media, it feels like a foreign language and a lot of terms and acronyms and what are you talking about? So I think that was really helpful as far as the self-assessments, the peer assessments. That's where we had to think. I think, yeah, I agree. It was very detailed. But in the end, it was breaking it down over time, which we were able to do during this program, made it feasible. And just picking up, and then we can just focus, and using that and the self-assessments, we might not be able to improve every aspect, but we can pick a spot and we can identify it using these tools where we can put our focus. So I think while it seems big, this helps us break it down even going forward.
Yeah, I would just agree with Alexis on a lot of that, and what Doreen and Jaycie also said, like looking especially at the peer assessment, the NEDCC document going in, it seemed daunting, like the amount of information to go through, and also it almost seemed like it was an assessment, like a more formal document than, you know, maybe we necessarily needed. But I think, you know, sort of going through and chunking out the different parts as we found them relevant, you know, just sort of looking at one section at a time, and then, you know, sort of taking it bit by bit made it more approachable, and also helped, you know, for me, keep me accountable in continuing to, you know, carve out some time, you know, every week or every couple weeks to look at, you know, what I'm working on with digital preservation, and not putting it off for things that might seem, you know, for other work, you know, making sure that I definitely kept some time for digital preservation in my schedule.
If I can just jump in again, Stacy, I'm going to be honest. Overall, I don't think there were any pain points. I mean, the fact that the program was able to break things down in like bite size, I don't even have words to say how appreciative I was of that. I mean, cumulatively, yes, it seems like there's a lot, but the fact that it was so structured, month by month, I really appreciate that.
Great, that's good feedback. Did any of you guys find that the work that you did on the assessments was helpful for building like bridges with colleagues where you work, or like useful as like an outreach education type tool?
I'm gonna jump in. I think tremendously. Being the only person working with the archive materials, being able to fill out those assessments and then hand them to my supervisor, she was like, oh, okay, like now I know what you're doing all day. And also being able to advocate I started growing our digital collection because I was able to show the work that the archives is doing that is easy to miss. You're like, oh, we're emailing you a form and that's it. You just have it somewhere. Where this was able to prove, like, have evidence of, like, there is due diligence happening. The stakeholders might not need to know all the aspects, but they are being done. And this kind of showed that.
I would just say for me, it helped to highlight the importance of collaboration. I know I said it several times in my presentation, but like I learned a lot of things, but if nothing else came out of this, the importance of working together as a team. It doesn't matter if it's a physical material or born digital. It's still it still has archival value, and so we need to work together to ensure that this is preserved. So I feel like that's what it really helped with, like highlighting, hey, we really need to work together as a team. I know I'm responsible for this area, but, yeah.
I'll just add, I think doing especially the DPC RAM was really helpful to kind of be able to hand something off to like leadership, because it gives you the visuals and you can show here's where we currently are, but also here's where we want to be. And it's so easy to just quickly get that information from the visual that it provides. And I think just how that assessment's built, where you have to like justify your answers, or maybe not justify, but just like explain yourself. So you're not just saying like, we need this thing. It's like, and here's why. Here's like a good explanation. We're at point A, but I want to get to point B. And I also think the NDSA levels, just how it breaks everything down like in such discrete sections, was really helpful for communicating with IT to say like, hey, I want to be able to actually do this really, really precise thing. And I think that helped me kind of almost like use language that they understood better, or I could be more precise with what I was requesting instead of just saying, how do I preserve this stuff? It's like, how do we do these really, really specific tasks? So they were both really helpful, I think, for different audiences.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Our IT team loves the NDSA levels too, so.
Sarah, were you going to say something else or just agreeing?
mostly just agreeing, but like I think Jaycie really had a point about like how these assessments have sort of given me the language to be able to communicate not just what I'm trying to do, but like why I'm trying to do this. So and then having a better understanding myself, I find it easier to be able to sort of translate that understanding into language for depending on like who I'm talking to. Like, am I talking to my dean? Am I talking to someone from IT? Because you're using different language to explain why something's important to like different audiences.
I have another question if nobody else has questions.
I was
I'm
gonna-
cu-
I
Or you
had-
have a question, Carol? Go ahead.
Yeah. I was wondering if after going through this program, is there any advice that you would either give to somebody who would be going through a program like this, or even just somebody kind of starting up? Like, is there something that you learned? Collaboration can be your answer, Doreen. Like, is there something that you learned that you would definitely recommend to somebody kind of in your same situations that you learned from the program?
I'll jump in. I'm not going to say collaboration.
You can.
I learned that I'm not alone. The fact that I'm the only person working on this thing in my current department, on a daily basis, I feel like isolated and nobody understands what I do. And so the program really gave me that supportive community where, hey, it's okay. It's a lot and it's okay. Let's work through this together. So I would say, you're not alone. It's okay that you don't know everything. That's fine. It's okay that you can't fix everything. Um, and in the words of a very wise woman called Carol, just as long as you left it better than you found it, you've done a great job.
I think one of the main things I learned in this process is that it's okay to just try things and figure out it doesn't have to, you don't have to aim for perfection. It doesn't have to be perfect from the get-go. It seems like, so much of the in general archives reading I had been doing prior to this program, as well as stuff specifically with digital preservation, you see the best practices, and those don't necessarily feel attainable for an institution of my size and resources. And that makes it seem like, you can't do anything, but being in this program and being able to sort of find small first steps, even with the assessment, seeing that there's different levels, and it's it doesn't have to be what every other institution is doing. You can just find what's best for your institution, and if something doesn't work, you can just troubleshoot it and try the next thing.
I think something that I really took away from this was having just how important it is to have really clear roles and responsibilities articulated. I think I found through this process that there were a lot of tasks that multiple people in different departments, even across campus, were doing, but then there were some things that maybe someone thought someone else was doing that wasn't happening. So just really finding those places where you're not duplicating efforts, and you're just making sure it's really clear who's responsible for what, and who's breaking that down into specific kind of tasks. I think that's something that I wish I would have known a lot earlier, just what assumptions we were all having about who was responsible for what. So making that more clear would be really helpful.
I was going to say there's a few questions in chat now. Stacy, do you want me to read one?
Yeah,
Or-
you can.
Okay. Adrian asked, could you talk more about the process? So we have a few questions, so I don't know if we've got about 10 minutes left. If we do 2 answers each, maybe. Question is, could you talk more about the process of making goals from your assessment results? If you needed to get others on board, how did you do that?
I guess I'll start. I will say we started thinking about our results and our goals going forward, but about 3/4 of the way, fine, you're going to a new job, those goals then had to change for me. So I was originally making goals of what can I do and how can I continue. I had to actually take a step back on our goals, because now it's a matter of educating the new person coming in, where I might have allocated some of our tech funds to maybe additional technology. I actually pulled some back to set aside for professional development for the new person. So it's being flexible, I think, was a kind of key thing that I learned, is that you think one thing's going to happen, and then especially with technology, things change so quickly, which is part of why we're doing digital preservation, because it all changes so fast. It just that it was just setting those, thinking of what is possible, maybe not making them as big as maybe you think, and just trying to be reasonable about them.
I can be the second answer. I'll just use an example. So I realized that there were a couple of the files when I came on board that were stored on an unmanned local server. And so when I went through going through the program really highlighted the fact that, you know, these need the files under the custody of the archives really need to be like protected, right? And so I was able to have a conversation because there was one particular collection that was like just lingering on this server. And so by uh, using what I learned in the program, I was able to communicate the urgency of getting that removed, or I should say migrated from that unmonitored, you know, local server, because the institution had moved to SharePoint, and they weren't even looking at that local server anymore. Anything could have happened. And so it just gave me support in my talking points. And then once I had my director on board, then basically, you know, I had weight behind me now that I could go to IT and say, hey, and so we had a whole discussion about these are best practices for archives. And I think the conversation went well, where I understood now that we speak differently as archivists versus, you know, IT people. And so I had to now like change the way I spoke in that meeting. And then he was like, oh, oh, okay, okay. And I wouldn't say he completely got it, but it was better than previous time. I hope that answered your question.
Thanks. Another question. Snowden says, I feel like one of the meta challenges in digital preservation is the work of learning. Can you all share some of the strategies that most helped you absorb all of this new information and or put it into practice? And then a second side question to that is, also, can you highlight aspects of this program, if any, that you found fun, enjoyable, or encouraging? Because digital preservation can be fun, right?
I can jump in for this one. I think one of the things for me is just sort of having an organized spot to like store a lot of the resources we've got through the program, because there's been, you know, quite a few times during this program where I've realized this might be useful in the future, but it's not useful for me yet. So I have like folders in my email where I just like have sent myself documents, or have documents that have been sent through other things. They're like, okay, here's for, you know, when we're doing, you know, if I need this resource about metadata like later, or like when we were talking about some of the like workflow processes, you know, that I had resources, and it's like, I'm not necessarily creating this process right now, but that's, you know, sort of the first goal I want to do. So I had those things, you know, so I had read them, and then I could go back and like look at them, like when I was, you know, going through and starting to create that process, and like, oh yeah, I remember this. And oh yes, now I understand how this is useful in my context. And yeah, it's, you know, it's encouraging, like the other part of the question, when you sort of see that sort of come to fruition. And, you know, it's been really enjoyable to get to know all of the members of this cohort. Back in like, I want to say it was like May of last year, the MAC conference was in Des Moines. And that was my first MAC conference, and really first like archives conference, you know, and it was just like, you know, really cool to be able to like see, like I spent quite a bit of time with Doreen at that conference, you know, I saw Jaycie there, and then like, you know, a group of us are actually going to be doing a presentation at the upcoming MAC conference this April. And so I'm really looking forward to being able to continue to work with, you know, Carol and Doreen and Jaycie on that, and be able to see them in person in a few months. So yeah, it's really just been nice to have like a community of other people who are like doing this same work.
Yeah, I think one of the things that's been like the most fun or encouraging to me was, I mean, kind of what Sarah is saying, like just having this community. Like Doreen and I talked a lot about, you know, specific projects or tasks we wanted to do, or just like, you know, kind of sharing with each other things um, that were challenging our institutions, just feeling like you had someone to talk to about like, why was this so difficult? Or like, how did you get around this? But like Doreen was really generous in sharing a lot of kind of like demonstrations of how to use different tools. Like when I visited her at Drake, I was just in awe of her workstation and I was like, show me how to use, you know, Quick View Plus and all these different things. And then when she was setting up Archivit, we were kind of going through some of that together. So it's just been really nice having someone that like you're not afraid to ask like a dumb question to, and who you can trust to like help you, and who, you know, who kind of like gets where you're coming from.
Thanks, everybody. Stacy, is there anything else? I thank you guys all so much for sharing and answering all these questions.
Yeah, you guys are awesome. Thank you for your presentations and for sharing. And we look forward to reading your case studies. So thank you everybody for coming, and hopefully we'll see you at the next two showcases. So bye.